Head, heart, hands. It's a very interesting flow of motivations and actions, if we can call them that, that govern how human beings generally work. We perceive things in the world using our body, and our brain processes those things and categorizes them, says whether they're good or bad, and broadly just that, whether they're good or bad. There's nuance to good or bad, but good or bad. And depending on whether they're good or bad, we end up feeling some kind of way about them. I'm sure you've experienced an event where you really are just annoyed by something. You're not quite sure why, but you are. Alternatively, you're elated, you're joyful, you feel just thrilled. Still, you're not quite sure why. Something is happening in your brain, and it influences how you feel, and it influences what you do. Head, heart, hands. But what does neuroscience say about this? Well, today we will be unpacking SCARF, a neuroscientific framework that provides information about social interaction, what guides and drives social interaction. Welcome to the Frameworks and Assessment Series by Chronicles on behalf of Elevance Coaching. This is part 1. What is it that makes us feel some of the things that we end up feeling? So first, let's unpack SCARF itself, the SCARF framework. What is it? So SCARF was created by a gentleman by the name of David Rock. And it broadly clarifies or classifies the 5 domains of human social experience that either make you feel rewarded or threatened. The acronym itself stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. What is sad is that in most interventions, whether it's coaching or mentoring, usually what one is dealing with is the threat part, not necessarily the reward part. And so we might end up leaning a little bit more to explaining what happens when there are threats abound that might influence or threaten any one of these particular characteristics. So our brain is actually an amazing tool. It processes about 400 billion bits of information per second. That's about 58, if my math is not wrong, gigabytes per second, or I think about 10 long form HD videos. It's amazing, per second. But the part that thinks, the part that sorts these things has very little capacity. 2,000 bits. And 2,000 bits is barely a paragraph. So how does it actually manage to deal with such a deluge of information? Prioritizes it. There are things called heuristics or rules of thumb that assist with saying whether something is dangerous or something is rewarding. So the heuristics basically aim to minimize danger. So if there's danger abound, we go the wrong way. If there's a reward, we go the right way. You can invert it depending on how you feel about it. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is we don't actually know. I suppose we do. We can't differentiate internally because of our caveman software whether the threat or the reward is a bear or a wild fig tree. Choose a random thing, or your boss about to, tell you off or give you a promotion. So our response, our fight or flight or survival circuitry responds the same way whether you are in a boardroom dealing with work colleagues with no imminent danger or whether you are in the forest with some wild animals and actually in mortal danger. So, what do these letters, when you unpack them, mean? So, if we think of status, right? Status is about how you feel or you're perceived. You see yourself in the social hierarchy within the social environment or context that you're in. If you are doing well and you are, seen as somebody who's awesome and the feedback that you get is typically positive, you walk around without really having pinpointed the fact that been given accolades and everything. Feeling generally good, feeling rewarded, right? And there's a bunch of dopamine that's kind of spilled out and it's doing all kinds of great, lovely, and wonderful things. On the other side, if somebody is taking you for a, insert there the appropriate Cape Town phrase, then there's a anger, right? There's this thing that's just loitering around in your head or in your heart or wherever it is that anger is experienced that basically is making you feel angry. You'll hear people talk about you don't see me, or they said something that made me feel small. So that's about our status. And when our status is threatened, the brain load, the mental load that we experience is similar to that we feel when we're experiencing physical pain. C stands for certainty. And once again, in a world where everything is organized, you deal with people who are OCD, and therefore you will know what is scheduled for that year in terms of meetings until the last day of the year. Then you have certainty, you know what's coming. On the other side, if you can't tell where you're going to sleep, take an extreme version, or what you're going to eat, your response is very, very different. You will lash out. And sometimes, once again, because the things that make you or that create uncertainty for you are not as clear, they're quite nuanced actually. You'll find yourself in a world where you're lashing out or you're just generally grumpy and in a terrible mood. And it's because people are busy, either things have been agreed and then they change those things without necessarily giving you a good reason why. So unpredictability is just not good because unpredictability means your brain is always working. And unfortunately, because the brain is something like, I think, 2%, if I remember well, of your body weight, it does consume 20% of the energy your body produces. And therefore, when you are in a world of uncertainty, you are sitting and you are continuously thinking about this uncertainty to such an extent that you'll find yourself exhausted, physically exhausted, because of this uncertainty. Autonomy is actually one of the big ones because autonomy kind of says you're the boss of you. You will wonder why people who are incarcerated, imprisoned, end up with such violent behaviors and violent outcomes. Yes, typically some of those people are, some, not all, inherently violent. They are in prison or incarcerated because of violent activities. But that environment kind of makes the agitation against being imprisoned and therefore the subsequent violence that results manifest because it's an unnatural thing for a human being to not have autonomy. And it's destructive, really. It actually makes your body not work the same. It doesn't work optimally. And I suppose by extension, your mind doesn't work, optimally. So, in a world where one wants to create rewards, you make sure that people are the bosses of themselves. If you've hired people to do a thing, let them do the thing. Don't micromanage. Don't, be in a space where they don't get to exercise self-responsibilities. Self-responsibility. Give options, right? And then people will feel autonomy. The absence of any of those, the absence of self-directed workflows and, absence of optionality just creates a threat environment that makes people behave a certain way. Relatedness is actually not too dissimilar to status, right? Maybe one can think of it as the steps or the activities that one gets involved in that can give them a sense of status. So if you are in a group of friends and you're the alpha, when you are the alpha. If on the other hand, if you are the ice boy, you're the gopher, you're the one that everybody makes fun of all the time. Yes, you are in the group, but you're not really in the group. You're not really at the center of the group. You're at the periphery of the group. And therefore, there is a sense of almost being in company of strangers. And you typically find that you've got very little oxytocin floating around when you are on the outs in a social group or not even in a social group. And I mean, as we all know, oxytocin is awesome. You know how you get it. But it also helps in just creating platonic and creating and maintaining friendships. And you don't want it as something that is threatening. It actually physically has an impact as well. If you're on the outs, there's parts of your brain that don't evolve or develop as well as they should if you are an outsider. Things like empathy, compassion, they dwindle over time if you're in isolation or you just have poor social interactions like bullying. F, which is our last letter, is for fairness. Now, fairness is very important. Everybody wants justice. And the absence of fairness actually triggers something in your brain that makes you say, ew. It's like when you smell something awful, it's the same it works in the same place in your brain and makes you experience similar emotions as you feel if you are smelling something rotten. So in a world where the rules are unequal, there's no transparency, things just happen, or the hidden agendas, the response, the human response, is not positive. On the other hand, if there are rewards for the work that you do, you find that you are motivated. And there's quite a lot of positivity that happens in your physiological systems that actually is nurturing for you. It just makes you, I suppose, a better rounded person. A funny one, though, is that studies show that receiving 50 cents out of a rand is better than receiving 10 rand out of 50. If somebody's getting 40, you will feel some kind of way. There also was this experiment that was done with the monkeys who were given apples or oranges on a regular basis. And then on this one day, the one monkey got given an additional apple or orange, and the other monkey got given two. The one that got given an extra one lost its mind and generally was just fighting and violent. And that's almost the primate's response to the absence of fairness. It's quite important that we understand as human beings that a lot of what we experience, we interpret. Our interpretations can be informed by our context or how we grow up. And how we grow up can be that thing that influences ultimately whether we fulfill our purpose or whether we do not. If your energy is spent fighting skirmishes in your social context because your status is threatened, you have uncertainty, people are quite happy to restrict your autonomy and agency, you struggle with relating to other people in general, or if you are in a group, you are not necessarily as well regarded and therefore you are on the outskirts of the group, or you just continuously keep getting treated unfairly. There will always be that experience of anger that you might not be aware of. So for me, the utility of scarf is actually quite potent. It's potent because in a world where you have agency, I mean, it's almost like a tautology. You have agency. You're the boss of you. And if you understand when you step back, if you understand your magical wiring, right, how you're made up, and when things happen to you, you engage second level thinking. You don't just respond off the cuff. Then you're able to exert significantly more control over your thinking, over your emotions, as well as the actions that you take. And that is a really, really important part of how to be a healthy and wholesome human being. So we do have a self-audit here that we hope you can use, especially if you're a leader. Because as a leader, your job is to remove threats and create incentives, motivational, positive incentives. So this 60 seconds scarf self-audit is actually quite helpful because it almost asks you to apply second level thinking on a continuous basis. So if, for example, You need to give feedback. You don't want to whittle somebody down. You don't want to break somebody down. So, you want to maybe do the proverbial flip sandwich where you'll say something great about the person, then give the feedback you want to give, then say something great about the person again. Same thing with certainty. Don't surprise people. That's not cool. There's no reason for you to be surprising people like it's something that's awesome. It's not. Tell people so that people will know, so that they can apply agency. They can get to the A, get to autonomy. They can marshal themselves forward so that they can be part of the solution, not just the person who's receiving an order. They can craft the solution. They can be co-creators, co-thinkers. R, relatedness. People must not feel, if you are their leader, that you sit on one side and they sit on the other side. If you're their leader, you either, when things are tough, take the blows from in front of them. When things are great, you put them in front and you walk behind them so that they can always know you're on the right side, you're on their side. And then transparency. You'll hear people talk about their values as a company, and they'll talk about transparency. Transparency, by its nature, implies fairness. It implies that people are being treated, everybody's being treated similarly and well. So this self-audit is quite good. It's quite important, and it's something you can do in less than a minute, to be honest. Whenever you're engaging people, actually, even as a parent, it's something that can be very, very helpful. So finally, as David Rock would have said, leaders, leaders, and leaders are not just people that are leading companies. Once again, you can be leading a social group. You can be a chief in a village where you are. You can be a parent, the head of a household. So you don't need to be a neuroscientist. You just need to understand how the brain works so you can avoid creating trauma. So you can avoid spending energy on managing internal chaos, internal warfare that's there because of an absence of understanding of how you actually work. The idea here is build psychological safety for everyone. And if you understand how your operating system actually works, you can walk around the reptilian brain, you can walk around the caveman software and jump to the prefrontal cortex that deals with rationality. So let's flip the switch. Let's manage our energy. And let's make sure that we all work well together. Thank you for listening. Be well. Let's create that balance, not only in the midlife, in all lives. Cheers.